Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Charlie. I'm 40 years old, and I've always prided myself on being a good husband to Evelyn. She's 38, and a devoted father to our daughter, Chloe, who just turned 18. I've never been the kind of man to let jealousy or suspicion poison my heart. I'm not one for conspiracies or whispered gossip. If someone had told me years ago that I'd be doubting the foundation of my own family, I would have called them cruel or crazy. But sometimes, it's not what people say, it's what they don't say, or what they laugh off too quickly. It started subtly, almost innocently. Friends, relatives, even casual acquaintances would say things like, "Wow, Chloe is the spitting image of Ethan." They'd chuckle, not realizing what they were planting in my mind. Ethan, my older brother, he's always been around. Family gatherings, birthdays, even quiet Sunday dinners. He was a part of it all. I trusted him. I respected him. I loved him. So I brushed off those comments. What else could I do? But the words lingered longer than they should have. I tried to ignore them, convince myself it was just shared family genes, the way siblings can resemble one another. But it festered. Then came that moment, so ordinary, yet unforgettable. Ethan and I were sitting in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. Chloe must have been around 5 in the photo, missing teeth, wild curls, beaming smile. Ethan pointed at the picture, grinning. "Man," he said, chuckling, "look at this photo of young Chloe. She looks like a female version of me. Almost as if she were my daughter, right?" The room fell into a cold silence. My stomach turned. Ethan let out a loud laugh like it was the most harmless thing in the world. But to me, it wasn't funny. Something shifted inside me. I couldn't name it, but it was sharp and deep. For the first time, my mind wandered into territory I'd always avoided, even feared. Was there something I wasn't seeing? Something I refused to see? Even then, I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was being irrational, letting an offhand joke get the better of me. But the doubt was no longer a whisper. It was starting to roar. I began watching more closely. Not obsessively, not yet, but enough to notice things I hadn't before. Evelyn's reaction whenever someone mentioned Chloe's resemblance to Ethan. She'd laugh too loudly, change the subject too quickly. Every time. It wasn't once or twice, it was always. And Ethan? He never looked the least bit uncomfortable. If anything, he seemed amused by it all. Too amused. That's when the memories came back. In the early years of our marriage, Evelyn and Ethan were close. Probably closer than they should have been. I had never paid it much attention back then. Newlyweds are blind to many things. But now, I was questioning everything. Every look. Every shared laugh. Every moment they thought I wasn't watching. Was I imagining things? Turning shadows into monsters? Or was this the truth that had been sitting right in front of me, disguised as familiarity? I couldn't keep torturing myself with maybes. I needed to silence the noise in my head, one way or another. And the only way to do that was with the truth. Cold, undeniable, scientific truth. So I did the unthinkable. Quietly, without telling anyone. Not Evelyn, not Chloe, definitely not Ethan. I collected a DNA sample from Chloe. I sent it off to a private lab under a different name. The entire time, I felt sick. Like I was betraying my own daughter. What kind of father needs to prove that his child is his? But no matter how dirty I felt, something inside me screamed that I needed to know. The weeks of waiting were torture. Every single day, every passing hour, I found myself unraveling. I replayed our wedding. Evelyn's radiant smile, the way her hand trembled in mine as we said our vows. I thought of Chloe's laughter echoing in the house, the late-night bedtime stories, the scraped knees I patched up, the proud tears I shed on her graduation day. I thought of Evelyn's glances, the way she brushed my cheek when no one was watching, the dinners, the holidays, the way our fingers laced together in the dark. What if it was all an illusion? What if I was about to destroy the only thing that gave my life meaning? Because of suspicion? Because of a test? And yet, beneath all that anguish, a deeper dread festered. What if I wasn't? What if the test only confirmed the betrayal I feared most? The result arrived on a Monday morning. I remember the weather, overcast, no birds singing, like the world already knew something I didn't. I held the envelope in my hands. They trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. My heart pounded in my chest like a trapped animal. I told myself to wait, to sit down first, but my hands had already torn the seal. I read the words once, twice, a third time, but they didn't change. They couldn't change. I was not Chloe's biological father. Ethan was. A cold numbness crept over me. My body became a grotesque knot. Throat tight, limbs heavy, stomach twisted. 20 years. For 20 years, I had been deceived. For 20 years, I believed in something that wasn't real. I had built my life on a lie. My wife, my daughter, my brother. Everything had crumbled in an instant. I collapsed on the sofa, elbows on my knees, head in my hands, gasping for air like I'd been punched in the lungs. Evelyn had cheated on me, with Ethan, my own brother, and Chloe. Chloe wasn't mine. Not biologically. Not in the way I had always believed. How do you even look at them after that? How do you speak? How do you breathe? But one thing was clear. They never thought I'd find out. They'd built their lives on the assumption that I would die believing the lie. But now everything was about to change. I held that DNA test so tightly my hands started to sweat. My heart beat like a war drum in my chest. My eyes kept scanning the paper, even though I already knew what it said. I just couldn't make peace with it. I needed Evelyn to say it. I needed to hear it from her mouth. That night, I waited for her. When she walked through the door, I was already sitting there, expressionless, the envelope in my hand. She looked at me with a smile, but it faded as soon as she saw my face. Her steps slowed. Her keys jingled once in her hand, then stilled. I stood up, held out the paper. My voice, firm, but fractured, cut through the silence. Tell me this is a mistake. I wanted her to laugh, to brush it off, to say I was crazy, that I'd mixed something up, that it was all some absurd mess, that I had nothing to worry about. But she didn't laugh. Her face turned pale. She looked away, and then she started to cry. In that instant, I knew. Her shoulders trembled. She tried to speak, but the words were barely audible, shaky, broken, heavy with years of guilt. I regretted it, Charlie, she whispered, but I never had the courage to tell you. A bitter taste spread through my mouth like acid. Never had the courage? I said, my jaw tight. Or you never wanted to lose the comfort of the lie? She covered her face with her hands, sobbing now, but there was no comfort in her tears. No redemption, just confirmation. My fingers clenched the paper so tightly it began to crumple. I felt a scream inside me, wild, primal, ready to burst. I wanted to punch the wall, break something, throw the whole world into pieces like she had done to mine. But I didn't move. I just stood there, feeling every part of my trust shatter into dust. My voice was lower than I expected. She sobbed, her face streaked with guilt, trying to dry her tears as if that would somehow wipe away the years of betrayal. But I didn't want her tears. I didn't want pity. I wanted the truth. It was at the beginning of our marriage, she whispered. The words landed like a hammer to the chest. And then she said his name, Ethan, and it burned inside me like acid. My own brother. The same boy I shared toys with. The same boy I covered for when he got caught smoking behind Dad's shed. The same man I defended at every turn, who had a key to my house, a seat at my table. He had slept behind my back, with my wife. I clenched my fists, trying to contain the explosion building inside me. And did he know? My voice cracked, raw and low. Did Ethan know Chloe was his? I needed to hear it. I needed to know if this betrayal was shared. If my own blood had carried this lie along with her. My stomach twisted waiting for the answer. Evelyn took a shaky breath and then let it out. One line, one sentence that shattered whatever fragments of my soul were still intact. Yes, he always knew. The words knocked the wind out of me. My knees almost buckled. My world, my entire world, collapsed around me. And then, like the final act of some cruel play, the front door creaked open. Ethan. He strolled in with that same lazy, smug smile he always wore. The kind of smile that said life never touched him too hard. He was still shaking off the rain from his jacket when our eyes met. And he knew. In an instant, that smile disappeared. His whole posture shifted. He shrank, like a balloon pricked by truth. Charlie, he began, his voice tentative, like we were about to have a talk about a missed birthday or a forgotten favor. But I didn't let him. No, my voice came out sharp. No excuses. No damn explanations. I threw the DNA test onto the table between us. The paper flapped as it landed. He hesitated, then stepped forward, picked it up. I watched his eyes move across the lines. Saw the moment he understood I had proof. Not just suspicions, not just whispers. When he let the paper drop from his hands, his expression twisted into something between guilt and resignation. It was a mistake, he mumbled. A mistake. My vision blurred with rage. A mistake? That's all our lives, our years of brotherhood, my marriage, my daughter's very identity, all of it, was reduced to? I stepped toward him, chest heaving, blood roaring in my ears. A violent urge surged through me, something I'd never felt before, not even in my worst moments. I wanted to hit him, to make him feel what it was like to bleed inside. But then I saw Evelyn, still on the sofa, still crying, and it hit me. They weren't worth it. They weren't worth me breaking who I was. Not like this. Not here. You two deserve each other, I said, my voice cold, almost alien to my own ears. Ethan opened his mouth again, some pathetic plea on the tip of his tongue. I raised a hand. Don't. I want you to feel what I feel right now, I said, eyes locked on his. And I promise you will feel it. And with that, I left the room before I lost control. Every step I took that night felt like I was walking away from the life I thought I knew. The life I had built, cherished, sacrificed for. But deep inside, something else was growing. A flame. Cold, sharp, and relentless. I wouldn't let this pass in silence. I could have walked out of that house. Right then. Vanished into the night. Left them to choke on the mess they created. But no. They had lied to me for 18 years. 18 years. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And choices come with consequences. So I waited. Patient. Measured. Quiet. And I planned. Every breath in that house felt heavy, like swallowing glass. The walls, those damn walls, felt like they knew. Like they were mocking me. I'd stare at the photos hung in the hallway. Wedding pictures, Chloe's school portraits, Christmas mornings, and all I could see were lies. Layer upon layer of betrayal, smiling back at me. Evelyn tried to talk. She'd sit beside me at night, her voice soft and quivering. Charlie, please. Just listen. But what was there to say? What words could possibly undo what she did? You lied to me for 18 years, I said once, barely looking at her. She just wept. Ethan, the coward, stayed away. Probably hiding. Probably hoping time would dull the blade. And Chloe, sweet, innocent Chloe, was the only one still breathing in this house without choking. She smiled, laughed, went about her days with no idea of the storm coiled just behind the horizon. And then I knew. Her birthday. Her 18th. The perfect stage. Evelyn, in her oblivious guilt or desperate attempt at normalcy, organized a lavish party. The kind of celebration that said, we're a happy family, complete with string lights, champagne, picture-perfect smiles. She spared no detail, floral arrangements, hired waiters, custom cake. Guests poured in, friends, family, neighbors, everyone there to toast to Chloe's new chapter. But for me, it was theater. Bad theater. A lie, performed by mediocre actors who thought the audience would never know the script. I kept to the side. Watched Ethan laugh, like the world hadn't just been turned inside out. Watched Evelyn flutter from table to table, playing hostess, playing wife. And they believed it. They truly believed I'd sit there, smile politely, let the truth rot inside me while they toasted with champagne. They underestimated me. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, clinking glasses. I waited until the moment was just right, when the music dipped low and the servers passed out fresh drinks. I stepped up, calm but shaking inside, and took the microphone from the stand near the DJ table. My heart thundered in my chest, so loud I thought someone might hear it through the mic. My hands trembled, but I gripped the metal tight and raised my voice. Congratulations, daughter. Heads turned. Chloe looked up from her group of friends, smiling, cheeks flushed from the attention. But before any toast, I paused, swallowed hard. I need to tell you something. Something your mother. I glanced at Evelyn, her hand pausing midair with the wine glass. And your real father have hidden from you for 18 years. The room went dead silent. No clinking glasses. No whispers. Just stunned, breathless quiet. Evelyn froze. I could see the tremor in her hand now. Ethan, once relaxed, was suddenly stiff, his back straight, eyes wide. And Chloe. Sweet Chloe. She frowned, confused. Her voice cut through the silence, shaky. What are you talking about, Dad? My chest burned. I didn't want to hurt her. God, I never wanted to hurt her. But she deserved, needed, to know the truth. I am not your father. I said it loud and clear, each word sharp, deliberate, meant to cut. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. A stillness filled the room like the moment before a bomb goes off. Then I turned. To Ethan. This man here. The one you call Uncle Heat. I let the words drag, forcing myself to look him in the eye. He is your real father. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Chloe's face. God, that face. Twisted in disbelief, the smile wiped away in an instant. She looked at me like I had just gutted her in front of everyone. And maybe I had. But I wasn't done. I pulled the folded sheet from my pocket, the DNA test, the proof, and held it up high for everyone to see. I'm not lying, I said, loud enough to reach the back of the hall. I have proof. Evelyn gasped. The wine glass slipped from her hand, shattered on the floor, sharp shards glinting beneath the lights, just like what was left of this family. Ethan stood still, pale as death, lips parted but silent. And Chloe, her eyes, wide and wet, locked on mine. You're lying, she said, her voice breaking. You're lying, Dad. Those words sliced deeper than anything else had. I stared at her. My little girl, the baby I rocked to sleep, the child I took to school, cheered at recitals, hugged through nightmares, and I shook my head. I wish it were a lie, I said softly, voice rough. God knows I wish it was. But it's not. And with that, the walls collapsed. Murmurs erupted. Gasps. Whispers. People looking around like they were watching a play turn into a car crash. Chloe's friends grabbed their bags and quietly slipped out, unsure of what they had just witnessed. My mother, trembling, reached out for a chair that wasn't there and collapsed to the ground. "Mom!" someone shouted. My father stood up so fast the chair toppled behind him. His face was red with fury, veins bulging at his temple. His fist clenched as he glared at Ethan, jaw locked, ready to lunge. "You bastard," he bellowed. But I didn't move. I just breathed. I had done what I came to do. I had torn off the mask, exposed the truth. There was no more pretending. No more secrets protected behind fake smiles and family portraits. Now, they would face what they did. I turned away from the chaos, Evelyn sobbing, Ethan frozen, my parents caught in the whirlwind, and walked out. I didn't look back. The sound of the microphone hitting the floor rang behind me like the final nail in a coffin. Screams, crying, confusion. It all blurred together. My chest felt crushed, like someone had driven a truck through it. But underneath all that pain, there was something else. Something dark, but undeniable. Relief. I was no longer the fool in their circus. No longer the clown in their farce. I had forced them to look at the rot they had hidden for years. I had barely reached the car when I heard footsteps running behind me. I turned around. Chloe stood there, her face flushed red with emotion, her eyes blazing with hatred. Not confusion. Not heartbreak. Hatred. "How could you do this to me?" she yelled, her voice shaking. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, trying to understand those words. I did this. Me? A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my throat. "I didn't do anything," I said, voice low, stunned. Your mother and Ethan, they lied to you your whole life." But she wasn't listening. Her pain had calcified into anger, and all of it was aimed at me. Not at Evelyn. Not at Ethan. At me. "You ruined my life," she screamed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." The words struck like a whip. She was shaking, her fists clenched at her sides, tears welling in her eyes but refusing to fall. And I just stood there, helpless. My daughter. The girl I raised. The girl I carried on my shoulders, sang lullabies to, stayed up with during fevers, taught to ride a bike, walked to school, defended from bullies. The girl I loved, truly, deeply, more than anything else in this world, as if she were my own flesh and blood. And now she was looking at me like I was a monster. And that was the worst stab of all. I wanted to reach for her, take her by the shoulders, tell her how much I loved her, that I always would, that this wasn't about revenge, that I didn't want to destroy her world. I just didn't want her to keep living in a lie. But how do you explain something like this? How do you make someone see that you're the one who was betrayed? That you're the one bleeding while everyone else keeps pretending? She didn't want explanations. She didn't want truth. She wanted someone to blame. And her mother was crying somewhere in the distance. And Ethan, the man who should have been buried in shame, wasn't even here. I was the only one standing. And Chloe needed someone to push. Then she said it. The sentence that burned through me like acid, that hollowed out whatever was left of my soul. "You're not my father. You never were." It broke me. Right then, in that parking lot, I realized something. There was nothing left to save. She had chosen the version of the story where I was the villain. The angry man. The one who ruined her birthday and humiliated her. The one who took a happy night and crushed it. Evelyn and Ethan, they would rewrite the narrative. Victims of circumstance. Misunderstood. A mistake made long ago. And me? I'd be the bitter, jealous man who snapped. And you want to know what? I no longer had the strength to fight it. 18 years of lies. 18 years of loving them. Sacrificing for them. Believing in them. And it all meant nothing now. I was finished. "If that's how you want it," I whispered, almost to myself, "so be it." I turned and walked away. Didn't say another word. Didn't look back. Got in the car. Closed the door. Started the engine. I had just lost everything. My family. My daughter. My own identity. And I drove. With no destination. Just pain. Throbbing. Constant pain in my chest. Anger, grief, despair. All twisted into one heavy, toxic knot I didn't know how to untangle. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe more. At some point I pulled into a random roadside hotel. Cheap. Dimly lit. Didn't care. I took a room, walked inside, and let the silence devour me. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, staring at nothing. Should I have exploded sooner? Should I have just held it in, pretended everything was fine? Nothing felt right. The Charlie who walked into that party was gone. Dead. The man looking back at me from the cracked bathroom mirror was a stranger. A man without a home. Without a family. Without purpose. But if there was one thing, I knew with absolute certainty now, it was that I never wanted to see any of them again. The next morning, I made my decision. There was nothing left for me in that house. No love, no trust, not even the comfort of familiar walls. Just silence filled with ghosts and betrayal hanging in the air like rot. I wasn't going to stay there, waiting for a miracle that would never come. I couldn't share a roof with Evelyn, not anymore. That part of my life was over. I picked up my phone and made the only call that still gave me a sense of control. I want a divorce, I told my lawyer. My voice was steady, and I wanted to be quick. What was left of my marriage had died the night of Chloe's birthday. There was nothing to salvage. No words to undo what had been done. As for Chloe, if she didn't want me in her life anymore, if I was the villain she chose to believe in, then I wasn't going to force myself into her world. I wouldn't chase love that didn't want to stay. The next morning, I woke with a weight pressing down on my chest, and a mind too exhausted to hold even a thought. The decision was made, but that didn't make it easier. That didn't ease the ache. The Charlie that existed before that night was gone. Dead. I called my lawyer again. Start the proceedings today, I said. I don't want anything from that house. Nothing. Every room, every chair, every photo frame and lamp and piece of furniture. It all felt like an open wound. She could have it all. I just wanted distance, peace, and whatever shred of dignity I had left. Most of all, I wanted Evelyn and Ethan to deal with the rubble on their own. A few hours later, I returned to the house one last time, just to grab some clothes and sign the papers. Evelyn was there, waiting. Her face was pale and swollen from crying, eyes rimmed with red. She looked at me like she hadn't slept in days. But I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just nothing. When she saw me, she rushed over, grabbing my hand like she could stop time. Charlie, please don't do this. We can get through this. We can fix it, together. I let out a dry, humorless laugh, cold and bitter. You lied for 18 years, I said quietly, but firmly. You let me raise a child that wasn't mine, while sleeping with my brother behind my back. And now that she hates me, now you want to fix it? I pulled my hand away, sharp and final, and walked to the table where the documents waited. There it was, my goodbye. Not in tears, not in screams, but in black ink and white paper. I picked up the pen, but before I signed, I turned to her. She's your daughter now, I said, my voice low and steady. She gasped, almost choking on her words. Her whole body tensed like she'd just been slapped. No, Charlie. No, you were always her father. You can't just leave. Please. But she didn't understand. She never did. I had already left. Long before that moment. The night I learned the truth, the night Chloe looked at me like I was a stranger, that was when I left. This was just the formality. She stood there, broken, still hoping I'd change my mind. Hoping I'd forgive. That I'd stay. Pretend. But I had given 18 years to a lie. Now I owed nothing to anyone. Ethan, of course, didn't show up. He knew better. He knew if he stepped foot near me that day, he wouldn't leave unscathed. He was probably hiding, waiting for the storm to pass. But what he still didn't understand was that this wasn't a storm. This was a hurricane. And he was the one who stirred it from nothing. Now he would stand alone in the wreckage. I signed the papers without hesitation and left everything behind. At that moment, Evelyn collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing, her hands covering her face as she murmured words I no longer cared to hear. Maybe it was, I'm sorry, maybe it was, don't leave, but I didn't stop to listen. Her voice echoed behind me as I walked out the door, but for me, it was just noise. Empty and meaningless. I don't know what hurts more, losing Chloe, or realizing she was never really mine to begin with. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. But one thing was clear as day. I would not beg to be in anyone's life. Not anymore. If Chloe wanted to believe I was the villain, so be it. If she chose Ethan, chose to see him as her father, then let her. I had given her everything I had, and if that didn't count for something now, it never would. Time, I hoped, would reveal the truth. And if she ever did come to understand what really happened, maybe it would be too late. I left the house carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the weight of a betrayal that would never fully let me go. But there was one thing left, one thing no one could ever take from me. I was still Charlie. Broken? Yes, but still standing. I would start again. Leaving everything behind felt like cutting off a piece of my own body. The pain didn't disappear just because I turned the key in the ignition. But with every kilometer I put between me and that city, it felt like I was slowly, painfully, dragging myself out of a grave. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Without Chloe, without a family, without even a reason to linger, I did the only thing that made sense. I left. No goodbyes. No last looks. I spent weeks on the road, driving with no destination. Stopping in places with names I didn't bother to remember. Trying to fill the hollow space in my chest with motion. But pain travels well. It kept me company like a shadow. The nights were the worst. The quiet was unbearable. My thoughts turned into a loop I couldn't escape. Did Chloe think about me? Were Evelyn and Ethan living their lives like nothing happened? The questions didn't just echo, they clawed at me. But I knew I'd never get answers. And maybe I didn't want them anymore. Eventually, I found myself in Austin, Texas, a city big enough to disappear in. A place where no one knew my story. Where I wasn't that man, the betrayed husband, the father who lost everything, the brother stabbed in the back. Here, I was just Charlie. I rented a small apartment on the edge of the city. Quiet, simple, anonymous. And then I started to search. Not for people, not for explanations, but for something I had lost. Purpose. The first few months were hell. I had enough money saved to survive comfortably for a while, but that didn't stop the loneliness from creeping in. The silence of my apartment some nights felt louder than any crowd. Betrayal was still in my blood, poisoning everything. I'd wake up with my heart heavy, breath shallow, wondering how to face another day in a life that no longer felt like mine. But eventually, I understood something. Pain doesn't leave just because you're still hurting. So I did what I knew best. I worked. I found a small restaurant for sale. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy. Just a plain little place with chipped tiles, an old cash register, and a tired sign that needed repainting. But it had potential. And more than that, it gave me a purpose again. Cooking has always been my therapy. The clatter of pots, the hiss of steam, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. It was the only music that made sense in a world that had broken me. And in that little kitchen, for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me that had been dead for too long. I felt alive. Every dish I made, every plate I sent out into the dining room, felt like a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around myself. Not to shut people out, but to protect what was left. To remind myself that I could still create something good, something honest. The customers noticed. They didn't know my story, but they felt something in the food, something comforting, something real. My restaurant slowly became more than a business. It became my refuge. And it was there, behind that counter on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, that I met Josephine. She had an easy smile, warm, unforced, but her eyes were different. They didn't just see me, they saw me. As if they could read the cracks I tried to hide beneath polite nods and half-hearted chuckles. She didn't know my past, didn't know what I had left behind, and I didn't offer it. For the first time in a long time, someone looked at me without the weight of judgment, without the whispers of betrayal hanging around my shoulders. And it felt new. At first, I kept my distance. I was polite, friendly, but careful. Trust had become a dangerous word to me, and even the thought of opening up made my chest tighten. I didn't want to bleed again. I didn't want to believe in something only to watch it shatter. But Josephine, she was patient. She didn't push. She didn't ask. She just showed up, again and again, until her presence felt less like an interruption and more like light filtering into a dark room. And little by little, without even realizing it, I started to lean into that light. She never asked me to forget, never tried to fix me. She just reminded me, through gestures, through quiet understanding, through her laugh that made the restaurant feel warmer, that maybe, just maybe, something good could still be waiting for me out there. But the pain? It never really disappears. Some nights, I'd still wake up gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, Chloe's voice echoing in my ears. You're not my father. You never were. I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she ever thought about me. If she missed me. If she'd ever come to understand that the truth I told her wasn't meant to hurt, but to set things right. Would she ever realize that the real destruction didn't start with me? That it began long before. In whispers. In lies. In silence. I didn't go looking for her. I couldn't. But some days, without meaning to, I'd wonder, was she okay? Was Ethan still around? Had Evelyn moved on? Questions that burned quietly, questions I never let myself answer. And over time, I kept working. The restaurant grew. So did I. I rebuilt myself, not in grand gestures, but in the everyday. In quiet mornings with Josephine, in the laughter of satisfied customers, in the way I no longer winced when someone mentioned the word family. Brick by brick, step by step, I could have drowned in bitterness. I could have let myself rot in the shadow of that night. But I didn't. I chose something else. I chose me. Even if I no longer had the family I once thought I'd grow old with, even if that chapter ended in ash, I was still here, still breathing, still creating something worth holding on to. But was the past really left behind? Then one night, while closing up the restaurant, I found myself staring at the front door. The lights were dim, chairs stacked, mop leaning in the corner. The place was silent. And yet, I waited. For what? I didn't know. Maybe for something to walk through that door. A ghost. A voice. A memory. A person. Maybe part of me still believed the past had one more thing to say. But was I prepared for this? The years passed. And slowly, painfully, I began to feel that maybe, just maybe, my life was finally taking a different course. I was no longer the shattered man who had walked out of that house in silence, heart bleeding through the seams. I was no longer the ghost of a betrayed husband or the father discarded like an afterthought. I was Charlie. Again, my restaurant thrived. People came not just for the food, but for the warmth that filled the space, something I'd built from scratch with my own 2 hands. Josephine was still there, quietly steady, her presence the kind of comfort I hadn't dared believe in again. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I had peace. But if I learned anything from the wreckage I'd once crawled out of, it's this: the past has a cruel way of returning. Not softly, not like a memory, but like a wrecking ball aimed straight for the life you've rebuilt. And for Ethan, the past didn't just return. It destroyed him. I never went looking for news about Evelyn or Chloe. I had promised myself that. I didn't stalk their lives online or ask old contacts for updates. I let them go, as best as a man can let go of a child he once called his own. But news about Ethan, that found me. The first thing I heard came from a distant cousin who passed through Austin. We had coffee one morning, and just before leaving, he said casually, "You heard your father cut ties with Ethan, right?" I looked up. What? Disowned him. Publicly too. You know how he is. He doesn't tolerate filth, not even in his own blood. Our father was a man carved out of old stone, strict, proud, unbending. He had raised us to believe in loyalty, honor, truth. Ethan, the golden boy, had spat on all of that. And so, with the same cold precision he used to build his career and reputation, our father removed him from his life like a cancer. I didn't gloat, but I won't lie. I felt a still, grim justice in knowing that Ethan had finally felt the cost of his betrayal. With the respect of the family gone, so too went the money. The safety net. The connections. The very things Ethan had always taken for granted. Evelyn, I was told, tried to stand by him. Maybe because she had no one else. Maybe because, in her mind, he was all she had left. But even love rooted in desperation can't survive the weight of guilt. People whispered. They stared. Judged. Neighbors turned away. Friends stopped calling. Her own family never looked at her the same again. How do you build something solid when your foundation is betrayal? And Ethan, he spiraled. Isolated. Shunned. Cut off from everyone who once saw him as a man of promise. The second thing I learned was that he lost his job. Not even quietly. He'd always been in investment banking, suited up, charming, full of buzzwords and fake smiles. But no one wants to invest their trust in a man with a scandal hanging over his head like a storm cloud. He tried to keep working, tried to latch onto new firms, sell his expertise. But doors that once flew open for him now stayed shut. He tried starting something on his own. A consulting firm, I think. Maybe something in real estate. But you need more than ambition to make things work. You need credibility. You need people who believe in you. And Ethan had burned all of that to the ground. He failed. Again and again. It was like the universe, after watching silently for so long, finally decided to settle the score. And just when I thought I had heard it all, just when I believed the past had finished bleeding out its last tricks, then I discovered the worst scam of all. Evelyn left him. It wasn't sudden. Nothing ever is with guilt. It builds slowly, eats away at the corners, corrodes the moments meant to hold people together. Maybe she finally saw it all for what it really was. Maybe she realized she'd sacrificed a stable marriage, a loyal partner, a family, for an illusion. Maybe she realized that Ethan was never worth it. And just like he betrayed me, she betrayed him too. Only this time, with absence. She walked out, left him to sit in the same emptiness he'd helped create in me. The difference? When I was left with nothing, I built something. Ethan just sat in the ruins. When I found out, I'll be honest, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, not relief. But justice, maybe. He was finally paying for everything he did. His fall from grace wasn't poetic, but it was thorough. And yet, even then, it didn't erase the scars. You'd think that kind of revenge would offer some peace, but it didn't. Not really. The pain stayed. The questions never truly went away. Time dulled the ache, but it never fully healed it. And in those quiet moments, when the restaurant closed and the streets were still, I'd still feel it. That old familiar weight, pressing behind my ribs. I thought I'd left it all behind. But 5 years passed, and the shadow never really left me. I rebuilt. I started over. I lived. But as I've come to learn, the past doesn't just haunt you. It hunts you. And one day, it found me again. It started with a simple ring of the phone. I was in the back of the restaurant, checking the invoices. I didn't think twice about it. Thought maybe a supplier had an issue, or there was a last-minute reservation. I answered casually, not even glancing at the number. Hello. The voice on the other end made my stomach twist instantly. Charlie, it's me. My mother. Her voice, usually soft, cautious when it came to anything involving the past, now held urgency. Pressure. Something was wrong. "It's Ethan," she said. "He's very sick." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My grip tightened around the phone, the silence stretching long between us. My heart started pounding, not with fear, but with something hotter. Anger, resentment, bitterness that had never really left me. And then I heard my own voice. Cold, measured, dead. And why should I care? I meant it. But my mother didn't flinch. She sighed, not in frustration, but in sadness. That quiet, tired sadness that only mothers carry. Because, deep down, he's still your brother. And he wants to see you. Those words hit me like a punch. He wants to see me? The same man who stole my life from under me? The man who stood there, saying it was a mistake, as if that erased everything? He wanted to see me? What did he expect? That I'd just drop everything, show up at his bedside as if nothing had happened? My first reaction was to reject the idea completely. I wanted to hang up that phone and let silence be the final word between us. After everything, after all the destruction he left behind, why should I give him anything more? But that call, it kept ringing in my head, long after I ended it. What if I didn't go? What if I spent the rest of my life wondering what he wanted to say? Maybe this wasn't for him. Maybe this was for me. A way to finally close the chapter. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to release myself from the prison I had carried for far too long. So the next day, I went to the hospital. I walked through those sterile halls with a weight in my chest, not sure what I expected. But when I entered the room, I almost didn't recognize him. Ethan, my brother, or the shadow of him. He looked small, fragile, not the man who once carried himself with pride and arrogance. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken, his frame so thin I could see the outline of bones beneath the gown. Time hadn't just punished him, it had consumed him. The betrayal, the guilt, the abandonment, it had all carved him hollow. When his eyes met mine, a faint smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. "Charlie," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, brittle and weak. I stood there, still, silent. What was I supposed to feel? Anger? Pity? Nothing. Maybe all of it. He swallowed, and after a pause, he spoke again, his voice shaky. I know nothing I say changes the past, but I never stopped being your brother. There was weight in that, a truth and a wound, but it didn't undo anything. It didn't bring back the years I lost, the daughter who turned her back on me, the man I used to be. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he didn't. But regret doesn't erase what's been done. Still, I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me still cared. Not for him, necessarily, but for the boy he used to be. The one who shared a room with me. The one who sat beside me at the dinner table for 18 years before everything fell apart. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. Some wounds are too deep for words. But I stayed. Maybe that was enough. Maybe, in those quiet hours, Ethan finally understood the true weight of his decisions, not just in the damage done to me, but in what they had cost him. When I walked out of that hospital room, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel at peace, exactly. But I felt lighter. I had carried this burden long enough. And now, I didn't have to anymore. The past couldn't be undone. But I wasn't going to let it dictate what was left of my future. And for a while, I thought that was the final twist in this whole miserable story. A final meeting. A quiet ending. I went back to my life. The restaurant thrived. My relationship with Josephine was strong, steady in ways I'd never known before. Her calm, her grace, it gave me something to hold on to. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. But even then, even with the success, the laughter, the dinners shared under soft light, there was a shadow that never completely disappeared. Chloe. Even now, the sound of her name in my own mind made my throat tighten. I still wondered if she thought of me, if she ever looked back on that night and felt regret. If, somewhere inside her, I still existed, not as a villain, not as the man who ruined her birthday, but as her father. I never looked for news. Not once. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't bear to open that door again and find only pain behind it. To me, she had made her decision 5 years ago. But then, one afternoon, as I was arranging some tables before the evening crowd arrived, I heard a knock at the restaurant door. Hesitant, almost unsure, like the person on the other side was debating whether to even be there. I wasn't expecting anyone. The staff knew to come through the back. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and opened it. And my heart almost stopped. Chloe. Not the 17-year-old girl who had shouted that I was never her father. No, this was a woman now. A young adult. Stronger, maybe. Softer, too. Her eyes were glassy, red-rimmed, full of emotions that had no words. Her face said everything before she even opened her mouth. I felt like I was staring at a ghost. The air left my lungs. My first instinct, God help me, was to shut the door. To protect myself. To protect what was left of me. But then she whispered it. Dad, I'm sorry. The word, Dad, cut deeper than any betrayal ever had. I froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. That word had died in my ears years ago. My chest tightened, like someone had reached inside and twisted something vital. A storm brewed inside me. One part of me wanted to slam the door and walk away. The other part, the part that never stopped aching for her, wanted to reach out and never let her go. Why are you here, Chloe? My voice was sharper than I intended, but I needed to ask. She'd spent years hating me. Now she was standing here, calling me Dad? Her face crumpled. Because I made a mistake, she said, her voice shaking. She took a breath, her eyes welling with tears that finally spilled over. I spent years blaming you, hating you. But now I understand. You weren't the villain. I just didn't want to accept the truth. Each word landed like a stone in my chest. I had waited so long to hear it. But now that it was here, I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? You chose, Chloe, I said quietly. You chose to believe the lie. She nodded, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her own guilt. I know, she whispered. And I was blind. I wanted to believe in the perfect family. Even when everything was already broken, I clung to the lie. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes, so much like Evelyn's, but softer, more searching, met mine with quiet desperation. But I can't change the past, she said, her voice trembling. I can only ask you to let me be part of your present. I didn't respond. Not right away. I just stood there in silence, staring at the girl I had raised, the girl I had held when she was sick, taught to ride a bike, cheered for at school plays. The girl who had once looked at me like I was her entire world, and then, one day, decided I wasn't even part of it. Years of pain don't just vanish. They linger. They shape you. But even with all of that, I still loved her. I had always loved her. Because the truth is, parenting isn't just about DNA. It's about who was there, who stayed, who fought, who never gave up. Chloe, after all, was still my daughter. No matter what the DNA said. No matter what Ethan had taken from me. No matter how badly I had been wounded. If there was anything in me still capable of forgiveness, of rebuilding, it would be for her. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to try. I looked at her, really looked at her. And finally, I sighed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no teary embrace or grand declarations. But it was a start. The next few weeks were cautious steps into unfamiliar territory. The first meetings between us felt strange. Foreign even. There was a 5-year gap between us, but it wasn't just time. It was pain. Silence. Misunderstandings. Old wounds that hadn't scabbed over. She didn't know how to approach me. I didn't know if I could let her in again. But she came. And the mere fact that she came back, that meant something. At first, she would visit the restaurant and sit quietly, always at the same corner table. She never interrupted. Just watched me work. Almost like she was observing a stranger, trying to understand who I was now. And truth be told, I was doing the same. Was she still my girl? Or had time and hurt turned her into someone I no longer knew? But little by little, cracks formed in the wall between us. We started talking, softly, cautiously. She told me about college, about working part-time, about the exhaustion of adult life, and how no one ever prepares you for it. I listened more than I spoke, and she kept coming back. The hardest moment came late one afternoon. We were sitting across from each other, a half-empty coffee between us. I was a stupid and hurt teenager, Dad. Her voice cracked as she said it, her eyes glassy. I wanted so badly to blame someone. And you were the easiest choice. I said nothing. I just let her speak. Because if I accepted the truth, she continued, if I really saw what happened, then it meant that everything I knew, everything I believed about family, about Mom, it was all a lie. She looked down, her hands trembling as she twisted a napkin over and over. And I understood, because I had done the same thing. Looked for someone to blame when the world came crashing down. That's what we do, isn't it? We find villains. It makes the pain easier to carry. But truth rarely comes with clean lines. It's messy. It stains everyone. She spent years thinking I was the monster. And now she was here, asking for a chance to make things right. At some point, I asked, and your mother? How's Evelyn? The change in her face was immediate. A mix of discomfort and a sadness I couldn't quite name. She never really forgave herself, Chloe said softly. She thought being with Ethan would make it all worthwhile. That all the hurt would somehow mean something if they could build something out of it. She paused, her fingers stilling against the napkin. But in the end, she whispered, she lost even more. A breath. A silence. He's gone. And she spent the last few years trying to pick up the pieces of a life she herself destroyed. I no longer felt angry, just a silent weariness that had settled deep into my bones. Some wounds don't heal completely, but time makes them sting a little less. The bitterness that once burned hot inside me had faded. I didn't want to carry hatred in my heart anymore. It was too heavy, too corrosive, and I had already lost too much to let it claim anything else. Chloe sat across from me, picking at the last bit of her dessert. Her eyes drifted up to my face, searching for something, maybe reassurance, maybe closure. She hesitated before asking softly, "Do you still feel anything for her?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The silence between us stretched just long enough. "I think," I said eventually, "what I felt died a long time ago." She gave a slow nod, her expression unreadable. No judgment, no defense, just quiet understanding. It took time, but Chloe and I rebuilt what had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were moments I didn't know if we could do it. But what we built, it was real. It was honest. Every week, she came to the restaurant. Sometimes she brought friends, sometimes she came alone. She tried new dishes, told me what she liked, what she didn't. We laughed about memories, birthday cakes I'd baked, that one awful burnt lasagna, the little cooking games we used to play when she was 6. She remembered the good, and so did I. The past was a permanent scar, etched into both of us, but the present was still ours. We couldn't change where we came from, but we could choose where we were going. One day, she stepped into the kitchen while I was prepping for dinner service. She picked up an apron, tied it clumsily around her waist, and smiled. "Teach me to cook like you." I blinked, then laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Not the hollow kind that hides pain, but the kind that heals it. She was trying, and so was I. And in that hot, cluttered kitchen, between the clang of pans and the sizzle of garlic, something shifted. Between laughter and flour on our faces, I realized something profound. Our connection had never truly disappeared. It had just gone quiet, buried, waiting to be rescued. But reconciliation wasn't a straight line. Some nights, old memories would creep in like shadows under the door. Sometimes, in the middle of a happy moment, I would still feel the throb of betrayal. Sometimes Chloe would fall silent, and I knew she was remembering how she'd once looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't her father. There were difficult conversations, unexpected tears, moments when both of us needed to walk away for a while, just to breathe. But little by little, conversation by conversation, dish by dish, moment by moment, we rebuilt. Not on fantasy, not on denial, but on presence, on care, on unconditional love. Today, when I look at Chloe, I no longer see the girl who turned her back on me. I see a woman, a strong woman, who faced her mistakes, owned them, and chose to do better. And in the end, maybe that's what really matters. I once lost my family, but I had the chance to rebuild it. And this time, on the basis of truth and respect. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.